So this is the primary landing page of the Ignition Architecture Builder. As I mentioned earlier, this application comes packed with features designed to accelerate the creation and modification of architectures on the fly. I'll start by highlighting a few of those key features, and then I'll dive into a demonstration of actually building out an architecture. While brainstorming what we wanted to get out of this tool, we knew it needed to be flexible enough to support the most basic architectures and complex enterprise solutions. Luckily for us, Mike Bordakov, an application engineer here at Inductive Automation, developed a free pan-zoom exchange resource that allows us to scale infinitely within this application. The file menu provides all the standard functionalities you'd expect for opening, saving, managing, etc. However, we quickly realized the need for additional features such as inserting pre-built architectures that we could use as templates, either individually or at scale. We've also added options for importing and exporting architectures from a single JSON file, making it as simple as sending an email attachment to share architectures. Next are the chart tools. These tools let us customize the look and feel of the system, from resizing your working canvas for accommodating those large or expanding architectures to specifying which components to render on screen. So maybe I just want to see Ignition gateways or databases. Really gives you that flexibility to simplify what you're looking at. So now that we've walked through a few, I don't want to say a lot, a few of those key features that we implemented in this project, I want to start actually building out an architecture. We'll begin by placing an Ignition standard gateway on the canvas. And what you'll notice right away is there was a toast notification on the bottom that guides users on various events during the build process. We saw a message stating that this interface is not designed to be drag and drop. So let's click on our gateway again and show you how it's placed by selecting the component and clicking on the canvas. Great. Next, we'll add a database, a device, as well as a client to make one of those very basic architectures. Okay, but what about connecting these together? Within the Ignition platform, most of us know that we can connect up to nearly anything. In the bottom left corner, we have the connection legend, which defines what color each connection is and links us to the appropriate page in our docs manual. Let's add those connections. We'll click on the connections icon and be presented with a new menu, and also see that the components on the screen are now displaying anchor points. It's as simple as clicking on the desired anchors for those targets, defining what the connection type is, and a lot of this is pre-built within the application. It knows that that gateway connected to a database, so it's a database connection, but there are other options, and then hitting apply. Sweet, but when we place many components on the screen, you can see how this process can be tedious. So we've added the ability to pin and auto apply the default connection type, making things much faster. And that's how I'll connect up the client and the device on the screen here. You can also modify those connections after the fact by simply clicking on the connection and adjusting it as you see fit. So we'll go into this device connection, and within the connection type, let's change it to OPC UA. So we can see that color change right away, and you can see the modifications are pretty straightforward. So we've created a simple architecture. Now we'll save this architecture, file save, into our templates folder, and let's call this standard architecture. It looks like I already had that in there. Similar to our designers, users can save architectures and use them as templates in other projects, as I already stated. So you did see another toast notification that came up there and said it was saved as a confirmation. Now let's create a new architecture by navigating to File, New. And in this case, because we just saved, we're gonna select Don't Save. And let's make a very simple edge site. we'll place an edge gateway along with a device, apply the connection between those two. And what we want to do next is actually group them. So we'll group these components into an area by using the add area feature. And then within all of these components, we have the ability to jump into those configurations. So in this case, I want to rename this edge site, and let's just change the color of the background to a green with some opacity to it. Perfect. So now you can see we have those changes. Everything is contained within that site, and we're going to save this as edge site in that same folder. All right, great. So I'm going to clear that out. So that was a demonstration on building a couple of very simple architectures. Now let's move on to modifying an architecture where we need to scale out ignition due to, let's say, resource constraints. So we're going to open a pre-built architecture that I've already built, and it's going to be this scale out site. What you'll notice here within this site, you can actually nest those areas as well. So you can see how this could work for a larger organization. Here you'll see that we have 40 devices and 30 clients connected to a single gateway. Given the anticipated future growth of my site, we want to split it into a front-end and back-end gateway. Each component utilizes a context menu that allows us to perform various tasks, such as resizing. For example, I'm going to resize that manufacturing site now. So I'll right-click, resize, and just drag that out to make room for that additional front-end gateway. We can also double-click on components to move them individually. So I'll show this with the database. We can move that out of the way for right now. The area context menu also provides an option to move everything within that area, so all of its contents. So let's relocate the devices now off to the right to accommodate some of those additional components we're going to add. So at this point, I'm going to move the standard gateway over and organize this in preparation to add that front-end gateway. The last thing that I need to do here is, because I'm not going to have any client connections coming into this back-end gateway, I want to remove those client connections as well as rename this standard gateway back-end.
As Tom mentioned, we're now adding a front-end gateway. We have a scale-out architecture guide available for free in our online user manual, which outlines the steps for doing this. I'll explain some of those steps here. We'll start by adding the front-end gateway to the architecture and renaming it front-end. And next, we'll connect all the clients to this new front-end gateway to make sure that they can see the data that they need. We'll also need to establish an outbound gateway network connection from the back end to the front-end gateway. We also need to set up a database connection to access all that historical data, which will be used for the visualizations that our clients want to see. Ignition's flexible licensing model truly shines here. Users will need to contact their sales representative to move the visualization modules, in our case, reporting and perspective, from the back-end license to the new front-end license. Additionally, we will add one free module, the Tag Historia module in query-only mode, which allows us to, as the name suggests, query that historical data that we've stored in the database. Thus, the only costs involved are for the core platform and the appropriate hardware. The scale-out architecture guide also covers how to migrate additional resources from the back end to the front-end gateway, as well as where to place modules. Because I know we haven't covered all of those individual things in this session, that would be a great guide to read for anybody looking to go from a single gateway architecture to the scale-out architecture.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So now that we've scaled out our local site, let's add in several of those edge sites that we previously saved. So the first thing we're going to do here is we need to resize our canvas to accommodate those edge sites. So let's make our height 1,000 pixels and apply that. To note here, if you do place something off the boundary, it's going to resize automatically. So in our case, we don't want to open that architecture, but rather we want to insert it from our file menu. So File, Insert, and we're going to navigate to that edge site that we previously created. In our case, I know that I want 4 edge sites, and instead of putting those in individually, we have the option for an instance wizard to where I can select the number of instances, define the spacing between them, and insert those at scale. So I'm going to change that instances to 4 and insert those right into our architecture. Now you can see what we pre-developed here. 4 copies of that have been inserted. And now all we have to do is apply those outgoing connections from edge to our backend gateway, and then we're left with a hub and spoke architecture. And that's the last one applied. You can see how quickly we can develop and how much easier it is to describe what's going on. By having a visual representation of our system, discussions are much more productive. I'm going to turn over control to Brad so he can discuss some of the additional features within the application.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So here's that architecture that Tom had just developed. I've edited this a little bit. We've expanded the manufacturing site, given our lines some different names and color coding, but you can see this really is the same architecture. So I want to talk a little bit about the BOM. So we have a bill of materials that's included in the architecture builder. It's accessible up here under BOM, Open BOM. And so I've got that open here in another window. We're using session properties to share this information. So you could even have this pulled up on 2 different screens. It's kind of up to you as to how you want to manifest that. I'm also going to zoom in a little bit here so we can really see our gateways. So in our BOM viewer over here, you can see we have a similar, file view kind of context menu set up. And so in file, we can go through, we can export the BOM view, we can change what's being displayed. EAM, we can go in and actually set up EAM unlimited if that's something that we're using in our deployment. But as you can see, I've got different entries here for the various gateways. So here's a standard ignition gateway. It's in our manufacturing site. It's called front end. And here's our gateway configuration. So we could go through and specify the version, a license key if we have one. If we wanted to, we could set this up to be redundant, and you'll see that the price changes here to reflect that as well. We could also edit the description and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and hide the configuration for these gateways just to make this a little cleaner. You'll also see that we have all of our modules listed, the ones that we have selected. So for our front end, we have the platform, OPC UA, Perspective Unlimited, and reporting. And if we want to do something like change this to 5 sessions, we could certainly do that from here, and we'd be able to see the price change. You also see an alert come up that says that the 5-session limit has been exceeded because we actually have 30 clients that are connected to this front end gateway. We also have support plans over here in the BOM. And so this gives us just another place where we can kind of go through and identify which of these support plans would be best for us, the cost of that, upgrades and things. Again, if we didn't want to concern ourselves with support plans right now, we could certainly hide the support plans and their associated costs. You'll see we have our backend server listed here too. But let's go look at one of these edge gateways. I could certainly scroll down here, but in larger architectures, it can get kind of cumbersome to find the gateway that you actually want to target. If you use the context menu here, we can actually hit View in BOM, and it'll scroll right there. So you can see this is in our manufacturing site, the area I called expansion, line number 3, and this one is simply named Edge IIoT. So you can see all the functionality that we have, the MQT transmission module, and then that total cost there is $900. Under View, I do want to go back and choose to show our computing load and resources section. So this is driven off of that server sizing and architecture guide that we had talked about earlier, which is available if you click this hyperlink right here. It'll open that guide in a new tab. But the idea here is to allow us to capture some of the critical metrics, about this particular ignition gateway. So in this case, I'm on line 3. We can see we have one device that we're connected to. Maybe we're subscribing to about 500 tags. I'm going to use an ARM processor out there. There's not a whole lot of history coming from this one. It's about 50 tag inserts per second. That said, my IT team has said that they need a 72-hour SLA on this particular device. If one of these goes down, they'll try to get to it, but it could be up to 3 days before I actually get a connection reestablished back up to my main server. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to be 72 hours of retention. And you'll see that I have a little exclamation mark come up down here, recommending that I have at least 11.21 gigabytes of disk space. We've done that by calculating the tag history per second and the retention time, but it's all kind of a moot point. I'm actually going to have a 64 gig SSD on this particular machine. It's also going to be running Linux, Ubuntu 24.04, that LTS, so we can capture all of this information in the tool. Similarly, if I go back up to one of my, say, my backend gateways here, we can see that we have 40 devices connected. Maybe I'm pulling in something like 55,000 tags. You'll note that my CPU and RAM are both giving me alerts. And so for the CPU, it's recommending that we have at least 8 cores. For memory, it's recommending at least 8 gigs. I'm actually going to put 16 on this particular server, give it a 500 gig SSD, and we could go through here and put in our history as well. So maybe we're capturing close to 1,800 tag history entries per second. There's another couple coming in from SQL, and then our retention time would be 24 hours. So again, that's going to require something like 25 gigs of disk space, but I have 500 gigs. It's not a problem. I can also go down here and select the operating system. So we're going to put this on a Windows Server 2022. So anyway, the whole idea here was not only to capture the layout and the individual modules and how these different parts are communicating, but as well as the computing load and the resources as well. As a former system integrator, this was always something that I had to sit down and figure out after meeting with the customer, was to kind of develop that BOM and be able to provide it to them. And so if we go in here and we actually look at exporting some of this, we have the ability to export this current architecture. And Tom referred to this earlier. This is the entire JSON driving all of the information you see on screen here. And so if you just exported that JSON, you could email that to someone else. They could do a file import, load that in, be able to see the entire architecture, all of our connections, all of this information, this contextual information that we've already added here. We also have the ability to export a third-party module library. That could be really useful for some of the integrators out there that are creating their own modules. And in the bill of materials section, we also have the ability to export the ignition module selections and their pricing, as well as a list of the ignition gateways. And so that can include their configuration, the system load, the computing resources. And if we select these things, we could do it as an XLS or a CSV. So once again, the idea is to make all of this information not only available in the tool, but externally as well. So we could easily import that into Excel if we wanted to go through and graph something by region or by line, or maybe a certain expansion, and have that data available to be put into other programs. Yeah, again, as a former system integrator, I really felt that including a BOM in the architecture builder would help users better understand and document the pricing as well as the compute requirements for their solutions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brad. As the idea for the architecture builder matured, it became clear that it should be shared externally. So we've actually listed it on the Ignition Exchange. It's live right now. It's posted here. You can use the QR code to get to it. If you're not familiar with what the Ignition Exchange actually is, it's an online website where you can host resources, templates, and tools that you can use in your own Ignition projects, and they all work with the free Ignition trial. This collection encompasses anything that can be built inside of Ignition, including but not limited to screens, graphics, templates, views, reports, alarm pipelines, scripting functions, database backups. I could keep going on and on.
We also plan to continue updating this application as new features are requested and bugs are identified. As noted on the Exchange, this resource makes use of Perspective and the web dev modules. So make sure that you have both of them installed on your gateway if you plan to use this resource. There's also a post on the Inductive Automation forums with a link included at the top right of the architecture builder, where you can see what's new, report bugs, ask questions, request new features, or just make general comments. We would love to hear your feedback.
You know, a little birdie told me that this tool will be getting updated to use some of the new features that are coming in 8.3, which is really going to expand the door to what is possible with the architecture builder. So if you never tried Ignition, you can download the free trial today and go grab the architecture builder and try it for yourself. Ignition is quick to download, takes about 3 minutes to install, and you can use it in trial mode for as long as you want. So you can dive right in and explore.